I changed the topic this morning because I thought this would be a little more appropriate in light of the special occasion. Bhandara, we've been inviting everyone to join us for a special meal after the lecture in honor of Swami Swahananda Maharaj, the president of the order, who passed away. Now 13 days have passed. This is a tradition. Belur Math is already over now, of course, but they had a big celebration. Many people came, and it's also just about 1 year since our beloved Swami, Brahmarupanandaji passed away. And it just seems like we had a memorial service recently, and close devotee passed away, and other bad health news that I thought I would bring back a talk that I gave many years ago about grief and mourning. The title is "Thou Oughtest Not to Grieve," taken from a line that's repeated in different ways in the Bhagavad Gita. So it'll give us a chance to reflect a little bit on the fragile nature of life and how we react to the passing of dear ones. When I gave this first talk, it was a bit of a personal talk because my sister had recently passed away, my only sibling. She was 2.5 years older than I was and had been suffering from cancer for 5 years. And both parents were still alive at that time, so it was a devastating experience for all of them. And we knew she didn't have much time left, but still, when the final time came, when the doctor said there's no more chance of any chemo working or anything extending life, so then it was very hard for the whole family to kind of digest the whole thing. Then, a few months later, my father passed away. And kidney failure, but we knew it was really from a broken heart. So my mother was left. She had to absorb all of this. And during the same period, Swami Swahanandaji, my Gurudev, passed away. So all three within a few months. And I was curious to observe how everybody reacted and how people can, assimilate this type of news. And I was most interested to see my own reaction. You might think all these years in Vedanta and all these years of attending memorial services and somehow trying to be in control of emotions and everything, that I would have been the strong one to help everybody else, but I was a mess. I was even surprised myself that I didn't react a little better than I did. There's a tremendous sense of loss, my sister especially, my only sibling. Yeah. So this is something that everyone will go through at some point in life, some sense of loss and everything. And we have to understand that when we're told that we shouldn't grieve, really meaning in the Gita, we shouldn't grieve for those who are passing away, but for ourselves, our sense of loss. This grieving period and mourning is something very, very important. And we all have to recognize the importance of that. So this talk really will be more about how we learn to cope with these experiences. It's not fair to just tell somebody, look, the soul will live forever, and this, don't grieve, you're being foolish and everything. It doesn't work, and it's also a little bit cold. So we really, now I think people have come to understand the importance of learning how to grieve, go through this period of mourning. So anyhow, the title of this talk is from chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita, the very same chapter that we generally recite and quote from during these memorial services. And this question of grieving is a theme that goes throughout the Gita, that Arjuna is suffering from this feeling of how he will grieve if he has to kill his kinsman. It is a kind of an advance that he's imagining how he'll feel if he has to go through all of this. So we know this dilemma that Arjuna has, that he's about to engage in battle with his own relatives. And it's very curious, something I myself don't understand, why in the beginning he was such a bravado that he wants to go and see those with whom he'll fight. He knows that he's going to have to, it'll be his relatives, but somehow seeing them, he has a real change of heart. And to him, it seems a very high-minded thing. To Sri Krishna, he sees it a little bit of escapism and cowardice, because this, all of Dharma is hinging on his fighting in this battle. So a very complicated situation. It's a tremendous dilemma for Arjuna. What will he do? He's faced with a dilemma. Does he kill? Because it's not only his evil cousins, but they have common grandparents and gurus and everything that he's very fond of, that he loves them, that he respects them so much. So he has this feeling of grief for those who are not yet dead, who he may have to try to kill in battle. And in many respects, we know that feeling because there are many instances where the elderly people are about to die. They're in hospice care or something, and we can't do much about it. They haven't died yet, but still, that feeling of loss and everything that comes, and sometimes feeling of guilt. Did we do enough? And then we have something which we call survivor's guilt, that we feel bad, that why did they have to go and why not us? We could have gone instead of them. So this is that experience. This is one of the things we learned from Gita. We don't often think about that. We learned, of course, about immortality of the soul, but how we face the death of others. Death of ourselves is not such a big thing if we have that faith, but loss of other people, personally, it can be a bad thing, and then we think about those who have children and husband and wife and everything, their sense of loss and how they have to deal with all of that. So anyhow, we start with Gita with Arjuna, he was the greatest warrior of the day, and the most courageous, the most fearless and everything. And somehow he wants to see those. He says, Krishna, you bring the chariot there. And in those days before you fought, one camp would be here, one would be there. They could go visit with each other. It was a little different. It was almost like a royal court with the jousting and everything. But let me see those that I'll have to fight with. And then he has what he calls this high-minded. He thinks it's some high-minded ideal that, better even if I lose or if I'm killed or if I give up this life of a warrior, become a beggar, beg my food, than to engage in battle with all of them. But Sri Krishna, he sees this as this hridaya dalbolyam, that faint-heartedness. There's a type of cowardice. Now, it's something in between. We have to give Arjuna a little credit, and we have to understand that it is a real dilemma. It's not such a simple thing for him. That even though he's part of this divine play, and he has to perform his part, and all the dharma, righteousness is in the balance, it's a very difficult decision for him to make. So he tells Sri Krishna that let them kill me, I don't care. I don't want to kill them. Or let me just go and be a wandering beggar, maybe live the life of a sannyasi even, or let me simply go without any arms. Let them have their arms, I won't have anything, and then they'll kill me. That's all. He said, I don't mind all of that, but this thought that I'll be responsible for the death of loved ones is something that unbearable for me. So the entire Gita, aside from giving us the highest possible philosophical truths, spiritual truths, it also has this little lila element that by the end of the Gita, he has to convince Arjuna. And of course, at the end, he says, yes, I'll do whatever you ask me to do, that I take refuge with you. And so that's, it's the plot line. It's a thematic element. It's not the most important part in the Gita, but that's the setting for the whole thing. So the better part of chapter 2 really represents Sri Krishna's rebuttal to Arjuna. And he gives lots of arguments. Some of them are not so good. I don't think they're also wonderful arguments that, oh, they'll call you a coward, that they respected you so much they won't respect you anymore. He's kind of poking him, that you're such a renowned warrior. They'll think that you ran away out of fear. But all the other arguments will be mostly about the real nature of the self, and that you think that you're killing these people. The body will die, of course, but the soul is immortal. So we get this idea that Arjuna's grief is misplaced, that the feeling is that he's identified them so much with the physical body that to him the death of the physical body will mean the death of them somehow. So all of these arguments are perfectly valid, but it misses the point that Arjuna is trying to make, and that I'm trying to make really. That grief is not for those who are dying. That this is it's our reaction that we're dealing with. So we'll see that Sri Krishna will begin. He'll give his reply. He kind of tosses a crumb to Arjuna. He says, yes, wise people will say this. It's not what you say, there's some truth to it. But those that you are grieving for do not need to be grieved for. He says, asocyan anvashochas tvam pragyavadangsha bhashate. So you're speaking like words of wisdom. But, and there's a big but, then he says, gadasun agadasuncha nanu shochanti panditaha. But wise people, they will grieve neither for those who have come or gone. That anybody, whether they're still living now or whether they'll pass away or come back again, that this is all the outer shell, that you're grieving for that personality, which will change and is not permanent and everything. So when he says that they don't deserve to be grieved for, it's not because of the evil deeds that they did. This refers to everyone. That so those who were truly wise. And so he's telling him that, yeah, you said words of wisdom, but not really. Truly wise, grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. So this is the first time in the Gita that we get this root shuch. It comes 3 times in this one verse. Shochati, to grieve, and those who have been to be grieved for. And we find this term used many times in the Gita and the Upanishads, Mundaka Upanishad, that he becomes Vishoka, that free from grief. We have the Emperor Ashoka, free from grief. And this kind of burning feeling from grief, we get that meaning also, that it has this idea of to suffer. Not just that we're mourning someone, but really some personal type of suffering. So we see 3 times in verse 2:11, different forms, ashotya, anvashotya, and shochati. So this is the thrust of the argument, that death applies to the body. The body is like clothing, that we can take it off, we can put on a new set of clothing, and that in every stage, really, when we go from being a child to a young person, the child dies and the young person is born. It's also different stages. Then we get to the old, so the death is just another one of these stages. So this is the argument that Sri Krishna is using, that the real self is unmanifest, unthinkable, unchangeable. Therefore, you should not grieve over the death of the individual, because the soul will not be affected by any of this. So at the end of this long section, we have Nainam Shochitam Arhasi and Natvam Shochitam Arhasi. These are almost identical things. There's no real cause for sadness, no real cause for mourning. Death is ultimately an illusion. It's not the death of the person, the real person. It's the death of this physical body. Now, before we start attacking Sri Krishna as being cold and hard-hearted and say, yeah, but we're human beings. How can you say that we shouldn't be affected if our nearest and dearest not only die, but we're responsible for it? Then we have to understand that this is all part of this Leela, that this battle of Kurukshetra is something that Arjuna is destined to take part in, is already determined that he has to ultimately agree to all of this, and Sri Krishna has to present arguments that will convince him. It's not that he doesn't understand the real meaning of grief and everything. So, and as I said before, this is really a kind of dramatic vehicle for us to get the highest Vedantic teachings. We may want to emphasize the plot line a little bit more, and many people don't like it. You know, there are many people who refuse to believe that there's not simply an allegorical meaning, that this fighting in the battle and killing people means killing our own internal demons and everything. But as far as we know, this was meant to be an actual battle, and this was part of that Leela, divine play. So we're not given too many details about what happens to the soul after death. Some indication that there may be some place where punya is experienced and then type of rebirth. But to me, the most important phrase, this nahi kalyana krit kaschid durgatim tata gacchati. This appeals to me very much, that no matter what, we may not be able to say exactly, is it union with God, is it merging in Brahman, whatever it is, but don't worry, if someone is a good person, they lead a good life, nothing to worry about. Nothing bad will happen to them. And those who have not led a good life, they'll have another chance. There's no eternal damnation. Don't worry about them either. That they'll be born again and they'll get a chance to also take to this spiritual path. Now, the real problem is that grieving is not, even if we have the highest understanding that the individual is not really dying, going from one room to another, changing one set of clothes for another set of clothes, it doesn't help much because it's our feeling of loss. This is the most important thing, our feeling of loss, our feeling of grief, sometimes feeling of guilt, all different things come into that. And even if we believe that it's such a good person has passed away, that they'll have their reward in heaven, they'll be reborn as a great saint, they'll have union with God, sometimes that makes it worse, because these are the people we miss more. These are the good people, the kind people that we feel there's no problem for them. They're the ones that we miss. So these are all the things that we have to learn to deal with. Now, there's been a great amount of research that has been done with regard to personal reaction to grief. And we understand that it's all a question of giving ourselves time, allowing this process to take place, that we have to understand the necessity for it. Every religion has it, different periods where we do some type of austerity, we do some type of offering or something. These are all for our sake. Now, there may be many people who have very deep faith that these offerings are going to the departed. That's okay. I have no way of knowing how true those things are, but for us, these things are all very important things, these periods of with rituals and penances and everything to help us to get through all of this. So this modern psychology now really recognizes this need to deal with emotional loss and this feeling of grief. There was a Swiss-American psychiatrist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Many of you may have heard about her. She wrote a very famous book in 1969 called On Death and Dying. It was kind of revolutionary at the time. And one thing I remember is that she specifically mentions how doctors are so hesitant to even mention death to patients, and that they themselves don't know how to deal with it. I remember years ago when this Obamacare came out. You remember, and one of the things was free counseling on how people deal with death. And there were people who objected to it so much that, oh, what is this? You're just trying to get them to not spend money at the end on hospital treatment, so convince them to die is okay and everything. But it's very important to be able to discuss with people the final period and what will happen at the very end. Anyhow, this Kubler-Ross, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she wrote this. She was inspired by her terminally ill patients, and she identified what she called 5 stages of grief. Now, in her research, these were mostly with people who had some terminal disease, but it's also for us who know people like that, or dealing with people who have passed away. All these different stages seem to work equally well with all of them. And there are reasons why these stages are important, because we can recognize which stage we're in, and to understand that it's not for all time, that it's a temporary thing, that we'll go through this and we'll be able to reach the next one, and that it's okay for us to go through a period of grieving. It's okay for us to shed tears and do all of these things. And we also understand that these are almost universal, that we're not the only ones who are going through this, that others experience grief in a very similar way, that we all have to deal with these emotions that we have. So she identifies these different stages. And there's a certain logic to them. Not everyone goes through all of them. Not everyone goes through them in the same order. We may all have different ways of dealing with death and tragedy and other things. But there's a logic to it, and I find it also something quite helpful. First is denial. So we hear that somebody has some terminal disease. We hear somebody passed away. The first thing is, no, it can't be. How is it possible that it happened? So this is one of the first things that we'll say, no, it can't be true. Or we say, no, everything will be all right. Yeah, people will come and say, I prayed to Thakur, everything will be all right. But it doesn't work that way. Not that everybody will automatically be okay if we offer special prayers or anything like that. So this is a very helpful way of understanding this stage of denial and how we can overcome it. We can overcome it by understanding that this is a natural reaction. This is a natural reaction. And if we understand that everyone goes through it, it's very helpful. There's a beautiful story in the Buddhist tradition. There was a young woman, Kisha Gautami. She was a young bride living with her husband's family in the nearby village. And she married at a young age, living with the in-laws naturally. She's a little bit lonely and everything. And a child was born to her. She had a young son that she loved so dearly. And in the meantime, her husband died. So she's really all alone and living only for this newborn child. So this infant son fell ill and eventually lying lifeless in her arms, and she's overcome with grief. So the first thing is she refused to believe that he's really dead, or she thought that somehow he could be brought back to life. It's irrational, but this is an initial reaction that people can have. This is denial. So she went to all different people, doctors, everyone, and said, what can be done? How can my child be brought back to life? And they all looked at her and said, what can we do? Child is dead. Then finally somebody said, go to the Buddha and see what he can do. If he can do some type of miracle and bring your son back to life. So she went to him and said, can you do something? Can you bring my child back to life? And he said, yes. You have to bring me some white mustard seed. So she said, good, where can I get it? You can get it from any house. You just can go to any house, see if they have any. But it has to be a house in which no one has ever died. Now, it's not like today where you have a new house, or these are old traditional things. Generations have lived in the same house. So one by one, she went to each place and asked for the mustard seed and said, oh, by the way, has anyone died in this house? And each place she went to, people would come, and then this grief would come back to them with tears in their eyes, say, yes, my husband died, my wife, my father, young child, this and that. One by one after, and the whole day like that, having to listen to all of this, that somehow understanding that, yes, this happens, this is life, somehow the horrible grief disappeared and acceptance came. And she went to Buddha, and he said, where's the mustard seed? And she said, there's no mustard seed. I've come to offer myself to you. That now I understand. So, yeah, because the loss of a child is a horrible thing. I always think of this Vatangani Devi. She was the mother of Baburam Maharaj, Swami Premanandaji. That she was greatly devoted to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna loved her son very much, very pure soul, and wanted him to be his attendant, and of course to live a monastic life. So he asked her, will you give me your son? Give me something. Yes, what? Your son. She said, yes, but does a mother give up a child for nothing? You have to give me something in return. So he says, what is it? And she said, give me the boon that I'll never live long enough to see the death of any child. Yeah, the very, very touching thing. And it turned out to be true that he had a very serious illness. Everyone said that prepare for death. It looks like you won't live longer. He said, no, my mother is still alive. There's no way that I can die before her. He had that faith. And of course, this is exactly what happened. Yeah, so this story of this Kishit Gautami is really a very touching story. We can imagine that just that experience of going through, experiencing the grief that everyone else has, that somehow we have this expression that misery loves company, that somehow there's some solace in knowing that we're not the only ones, that many other people have had to go through this. Now, she says, this Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that this is followed by anger. Yeah, we accept it, but why me? What did I do to deserve this? Yeah, as if we're the only ones, but still, well, we don't think in that way, that we may be very sincere and feel that we've led a good life, we're great devotees, we pray to Thakur, Mother, all of the time. How could they allow that to happen to us? And then some anger comes, and sometimes loss of faith comes. You know, I get very nervous when devotees come to me and say that I was about to get into a terrible accident, but Thakur saved me. I get very nervous, because what will they say when he doesn't? Yeah. Will they say, every time we get in an accident, will we say, why didn't Thakur save me? He could have saved me, why didn't he save me? So when things happen, sometimes people take it that way, very personally, that this feeling that we somehow should be protected, we're devotees. Forget about everybody else. Somehow we have that faith. Now, I don't want to say anything. If people have that real faith, this is also a wonderful thing. Yeah. But it can go in a second. I've seen it. That people had that faith and they completely lose it. I read something very interesting recently. This is a new book that's been published, Being Spiritual, Staying Practical by Swami Swahananda. He was the head of our Boston and Providence centers for many, many years, and they collected different sayings and different conversations, things that he had. This was August 23rd, 1974. The Swami was asked whether a personal tragedy could be said to be the will of God. Here specifically, death of a child, it seems. So he said, the phrase, God's will, must be understood properly. It is not like a calculated decision of God. Nature functions, that's all. The only way to cope with tragedy is to bear it patiently. As the Gita, again chapter 2, verse 14 says, these things come and go. They are impermanent in their nature. Bear them patiently, O Arjuna. It is simple and seemingly cruel, but it is the only way. Then he says, Arjuna's son was killed on the battlefield. Arjuna's wife, who was Krishna's sister, was stricken with grief. Krishna had not been present on the battlefield when her son was killed. So when he arrived, she cried to him, "O brother, if you had been there, it would have never happened." Krishna, with all love and compassion, said quietly, "I was there." If a tragic event involves a baby, it cannot be karma for the child, because karma only functions at the conscious level when discrimination and self-consciousness are present. It is just an accident, nature functioning. Bear it and become fit for immortality. The whole point of karma is what we learn from it or how we bear it. If we can bear terrible suffering with patience, we move up a lot. If we commit blunders but sincerely repent and resolve to avoid them in the future, we move up a lot. All we can do with nature's mysterious play is bear it and surrender to God. Yes, sometimes this anger is just an indication of the depth of our love and again, that terrible feeling of loss. We see this even in the life of Swami Vivekananda. When he heard that Goodwin died, we know about Goodwin, J.J. Goodwin. He was an Englishman who happened to come to the United States. He became the kind of personal secretary, you could say, of Swamiji. He took notes. He was an expert at shorthand. He took down all the notes of Swamiji's lectures. This is how we have, especially the 4 yogas, all because of what Goodwin did. And he came to India with Swamiji, and he was in South India. He came down with some type of fever and died very quickly. And Swamiji was so upset. And somebody said to him, "Well, Swamiji, can't we say that it was God's will that he died?" So then Swamiji said, "As if it would not be one's right and duty to fight such a God and slay him for killing Goodwin." So that was his reaction, that don't talk to me now about God's will or anything like that, that this is my own deep personal sense of loss, how much he did for me, he was thinking. Then she says, next stage is that of bargaining, that the people say, "Yeah, I'll do anything for a few more years. I'll give my life savings if only I can be cured." That this is if it happens to us, or someone that we love very dearly. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he tells that story about 2 different stories about the yogi who thinks that, "Oh, my family loves me, they'll do anything for me." And then he finds that none of them are willing to take the pill, that the pill will save him, but they'll die. But actually, it's not true. That I know that there are people who would be willing to give up their own life to save the life of a loved one. I know it's true. And so this bargaining idea comes in. If only, I'm willing to sacrifice for the other person. Even this whole idea, say with Sri Ramakrishna, that with the Keshav, a little bit of a bargaining type of thing. The mother, you save him, I'll give you, I'll give you some special offerings. This is a nice way that it's done in India, but a little bit that idea of bargaining. So this is that next stage. Then depression. Now, they're a very strong word, but we can say deep feeling of sadness, this feeling of emptiness. This, again, is natural and something universal. Even these great souls go through this. We shouldn't think, and Sri Ramakrishna stressed this, that these great souls don't have a human heart. Their heart is far more human than ours. And they can feel that pain of loss far more than we can. And we see this in so many instances. Swami Turiyanandaji, we consider him to be the ideal yogi, so firm and so strong, but he had such tremendous love for Swamiji. And when he was in California, Swamiji had gone back to India, he felt such a longing to see Swamiji that he made a special trip, and when he was on his way back, I think the ship stopped in Burma or something, they got a telegraph, Swamiji had passed away. He went back with such intense longing to see Swamiji. They all loved Swamiji so much, to see him one more time, that really it was such a shock to his system that he could hardly do anything. He didn't go back to California. He didn't take part in any of the kind of active role in the work of the order for some time, and really felt just like giving up everything. So for someone like that, to have that type of reaction, then we know that this can happen to us. We'll easily also look at Holy Mother. She had no desire to live after Sri Ramakrishna passed away. She herself said that. What is the use of living anymore after losing such a golden person? Huh? And they say only because of her almost frequent visions of Sri Ramakrishna, and then getting her own disciples, and then Radhu coming, that somehow she got attached back so she could continue to live. But she also felt a tremendous sense of loss. They all did, all the direct disciples. When Swamiji died, they also felt that their leader was gone. So this is followed, this depression or sadness, by acceptance. And this is something that's not accepted by everybody. This final stage is not reached by everybody. We hope that this comes, that we recognize that some things are inevitable, and death, of course, is one of them. There's another one of my favorite lines from Gita, Tasmat apariharyate natvam shochitam arhasi. Another reason why you shouldn't grieve. If something is inevitable, if there's no way we can prevent it from happening, why grieve over it? It's going to happen. We have to learn to accept it. So this acceptance is extremely important. That if there's anything we can do to prevent something, then we do it. Otherwise, however we understand it, it's God's will, it's our karma, or this is just the way the cards were dealt. We don't know why. We don't know why. We can't explain everything that happens, but if we can learn this type of acceptance, it'll be extremely helpful for all of us. For me, looking at the way Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother we saw, Sri Ramakrishna, also the way he dealt with loss is something very, very helpful. And we know bargaining. I forgot this one thing. Holy Mother, she also did that. She went to Tarakeshwar, and laid down before him, and I won't move, I won't eat anything. You have to save Sri Ramakrishna. Then she reached that acceptance. She heard somehow that no matter what you do, that his time has come. And he also said, you didn't get anything, when you went there. He knew that also. There's another very helpful story, interesting story, incident in the life of Holy Mother. That there's a poor woman, very devoted to Holy Mother, who had a child who died, and came, and everyone came to Holy Mother, everyone thought that Holy Mother will say, no, my child, this is the way of the world, that your child is now with Thakur and everything, nothing to worry about. But she just got very quiet. She didn't say anything. And then they saw she started weeping. So Holy Mother weeping and the devotee weeping, experiencing the grief along with her. And ultimately it lifted the grief of this woman to a great extent. Sri Ramakrishna, he had his own experience, the one that we know best. Before we get to that, another nice incident from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, that one of his close devotees, I think Adhar, brought his friend, Sharada somebody, who had also, he had lost a son, the death of a son. So they thought that this will be for him to meet Sri Ramakrishna, it'll be helpful to him to remove his grief. So this is Adhar, And when he saw this man and heard the whole story, that he sang a song as if to himself, but of course for the benefit, the very beautiful song. It says, to arms, O man, death storms your house in battle array. Bearing the quiver of knowledge, mount the chariot of devotion, bend the bow of your tongue with the bowstring of love, and aim at him the shaft of Mother Kali's holy name. He is a ruse for the fray. You need no chariot or charioteer. Fight your foe from the Ganges bank, and he is easily slain. Then he said to the devotee, what can you do? Be ready for death. Death has entered the house. You must fight him with the weapon of God's holy name. God alone is the doer. I say, O Lord, I do as thou doest through me. I speak as thou speakest through me. I am the machine, and thou art the operator. I am the house, and thou art the indweller. I am the engine, and thou art the engineer. Give your power of attorney to God. One doesn't come to grief through letting a good man assume one's responsibilities. Let his will be done. Then he added, but isn't your grief for your son only natural? The son is one's own self reborn. Lakshmana ran to Ravana when the latter fell dead on the battlefield. Looking at Ravana's body, he found that every one of his bones was full of holes. Thereupon he said to Rama, O Rama, glory be to your arrows. There's no spot in Ravana's body that they have not pierced. Brother, replied Rama, the holes you see in his bones are not from my arrows. Grief for his sons has pierced them through and through. These holes are the marks of his grief. It has penetrated his very bones. Then I wanted to say a little about Akshay. This is a very touching incident in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. He had a nephew. This was the son of his eldest brother, Ram Kumar. And when he was born, Sri Ramakrishna was still living in Kamarpukur at that time. And this Ram Kumar, and mother died when he was born, and Ram Kumar had some presentiment that also the son would not live long, and he never touched him, played with him or anything, because he didn't want to get too attached, because he knew that he would lose him eventually. So Sri Ramakrishna, probably he was 12, 13, 14, 15, those few years before he came to Kolkata with his elder brother, that he played with him and helped raise him and became very attached to him. Very loving, sweet, very young boy with all good qualities. So Sri Ramakrishna was very happy when he became 17 and came to Dakshineshwar. And he served as a priest in the Arati Govinda temple in Dakshineshwar. Now, Thakur knew somehow also that if he married, that somehow he wouldn't live long. And this is what happened. Shortly after his marriage, in 1869, he fell ill with a high fever. And Sri Ramakrishna was prepared. He really thought that he will not survive this. In those days, it was very common. People got fever and died. We don't know, they didn't have any modern medicines that they could prevent it in many cases. He was staying in, if you know Dakshineshwar, the large room on the other side of Nahabat. Sri Ramakrishna lived in that room his first, I think, 16 years. And Akshay died there, and he refused to live there. He couldn't bear to live there anymore. Then he moved to the room that we know now as his present room. So anyhow, he was there when his Akshay passed away, and he related his experience to the devotees. Akshay died before my very eyes, but it did not affect me in the least. I stood by and watched a man die. It was like a sword being drawn from its scabbard. I enjoyed the scene and laughed and sang and danced over it. They removed the body and cremated it. But the next day, as I stood there, pointing to the southeast veranda of his room, I felt a racking pain for the loss of Akshay, as if somebody were squeezing my heart like a wet towel. I wondered at it and thought that the mother was teaching me a lesson. I was not much concerned even with my own body, much less with a relative. But if such was my pain at the loss of a nephew, how much more must be the grief of the householders at the loss of their near and dear ones. So this is the example. This is why Sri Ramakrishna says that the avatar comes with all human qualities, with a human heart. It lives in the world just as we do, only different. In so many essential ways different, but he emphasizes that they'll have the same type of human emotions so that we can identify with them. If they're only sthita prajna, they won't be much help to us. We'll admire them from afar, but when we see how Sri Ramakrishna, he's giving these two teachings here. Yes, nothing to grieve about for them. And just like the sword being pulled out of the scabbard, that there's no ultimate death for them. But for us, that we have the tremendous feeling of loss when these near and dear ones go. So it's something very natural, something that we all have to learn to deal with, and to understand that it's not only okay to feel this sense of loss and grief, but necessary. And so, anyhow, without being too morose, I thought that this might be a good time, this occasion when we're observing this special feast, ending this little period of mourning for the present Maharaj, and thinking about others who also who have passed away, that this might be something that would be a little bit helpful. Yeah, our Swami Brahmarupanandaji, some people have asked, do we do anything to observe? For sadhus, we don't do anything. Even for Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Swamiji, we don't observe the day of their passing. 4th of July is something unusual for Swamiji, but we feel that really if anyone deserves to be called immortal and having no birth and death, that it should be the sadhus. So we'll have a closing song. Next week, the talk I was supposed to give today, I'll give that time. And then everyone, please join us in the basement, that we'll have a special bhandara, special meal in honor of revered President Maharaj Swami Swahananda.